Okay, so today we're really diving deep into something that's got everyone talking, and that's universal basic income, or UBI, as you might have seen it.
Yeah, it's really everywhere right now. And what's interesting is we're not just talking hypotheticals here. We actually have some concrete findings from, get this, the biggest U.S. trial of UBI to date.
Right, and not to mention, it's funded by Sam Altman, the OpenAI guy, so this isn't just some passing interest for him.
Exactly. And this is about way more than just handing out checks. It gets to the heart of how we view work and security in a world where, let's face it, jobs are changing faster than ever.
Which is what makes this study so fascinating, right? I mean, we've got real data to work with here.
Absolutely. And it's not just a small scale experiment either. We're talking over 2,000 people across different states, all receiving $1,000 a month for 2 years. That's huge.
It's a serious study, which makes the findings that much more compelling. And one of the things that really jumped out, at least for me, was how people actually used the money. It wasn't always what you might expect.
Right. It definitely challenges some assumptions. You might think, okay, free money, people will just blow it. But that's not what happened at all.
Not even close. A lot of people, they took that money and put it right back into things like education, starting businesses,
So, yeah.
even therapy.
Yeah, things that improve their lives, their future. And that's a crucial point here because it suggests that giving people that bit of financial breathing room allowed them to make choices not out of desperation, but out of what they actually wanted for themselves.
It's about agency, right? Having the space to think beyond just getting by. And that's where it starts to get really interesting because a study found that UBI didn't make people work less, which is what a lot of people assume.
It's counterintuitive, but the data shows that people actually ramped up their job searching.
So then the question becomes, if you're getting this extra money, why even bother looking for work?
And that's where it gets really fascinating. What the research suggests is that with that financial pressure off, people could be more picky about the kind of work they were willing to do. They could hold out for something better, something more fulfilling.
Instead of just taking any job to survive, they could be more strategic
Right.
and think about their careers long term.
It totally flips the script on how we think about financial assistance, right? It's not about making people reliant. It's potentially about giving them the power to create a better future for themselves.
And that has implications not just for the individual, but for the economy as a whole, which is something we definitely need to unpack further. But before we get into that, I think it's important to talk about another major takeaway from this study, and that's the impact of UBI on health. It really makes you think, right? Just that little bit of breathing room financially can have such a huge impact on people's lives, their well-being. So what kind of connections did they actually find between UBI and people's health in this study?
Well, one of the most interesting things they saw was a significant drop in, get this, problematic drinking among the folks getting the basic income.
Oh, wow. And when you say significant,
We're not talking about a small dip here. The study actually found a 20% reduction. That's substantial.
wow, 20%. That's a big, it's not just like a blip in the data. What other kind of health improvements did they see?
Well, they also found a pretty massive decrease, like 53% in the number of days people reported using painkillers, the non-prescribed kind. And that, coupled with the reduction in drinking, it really paints a picture, right? It's like that financial buffer gave people the space to actually deal with their problems head on instead of turning to, potentially harmful ways to cope.
It's like having that safety net lets you actually address the root issues instead of just masking them. Did the study look at mental health at all?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people talked about feeling less anxious, less stressed about money, which isn't surprising, right? But it really underscores how connected our financial well-being is to our mental state. Even a small increase in financial security can make a huge difference.
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
If you're not constantly worried about paying rent or putting food on the table, you've got more mental energy to focus on taking care of yourself in other ways.
Exactly. And that's what's so groundbreaking about this study. It challenges us to completely rethink how we approach financial assistance. Maybe, just maybe, giving people a little more security actually empowers them to make healthier choices for themselves.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential benefits,
Mhm.
but what about the elephant in the room, the cost? Implementing UBI on a national scale, that's a massive financial undertaking. How do people who support UBI address that?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? It's easy to get behind the idea, but then you think, how on earth could we actually afford this?
It's definitely something UBI proponents get asked about all the time. And, it's not like they're ignoring the issue. What they often point out is we need to look at it as more than just a simple cost.
Like it's not as simple as just adding up the numbers and seeing a huge price tag.
Right, because we're already spending a lot on various social programs. Think about things like unemployment benefits, food stamps, housing assistance. That all adds up.
So are you saying those programs would become obsolete under a UBI system? It's not necessarily about getting rid of them entirely, but think about it. A single streamlined UBI system could potentially be way more efficient than managing a bunch of different programs, each with their own set of rules and paperwork.
It's like cutting through the red tape.
Exactly. And less bureaucracy could actually lead to cost savings, which could then, offset some of that initial investment in UBI.
That makes sense. And we haven't even touched on the potential economic benefits we were talking about earlier. If UBI really does lead to more entrepreneurship, a more skilled workforce, a healthier population overall, couldn't that boost the economy and actually generate more tax revenue in the long run?
It's a bit of a domino effect, right? You invest in people, and that investment can potentially lead to broader economic growth, which then cycles back. It's not a guaranteed thing, of course, but it's a factor to consider.
So really, it's a much more complex picture than just looking at the upfront cost of UBI. You have to weigh that against all these potential benefits, both for individuals and for the economy as a whole.
Exactly. It's a cost-benefit analysis for sure. And I think this study really provides some crucial data to inform that discussion. It's not the final word on UBI by any means, but it definitely pushes us to think differently, to challenge our assumptions about work, income, how we support each other as a society, especially as we enter this, uncharted territory with automation changing the landscape of work as we know it.
It's a whole new world out there, that's for sure. And this study on UBI, it's like a peek into one possible future. It doesn't give us all the answers, but it definitely raises some really important questions.
Like, how do we make sure everyone has the opportunity to not just survive, but thrive in a future where traditional jobs might look radically different?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And on that note, we'll leave you with something to ponder. Imagine just for a moment you were given $1,000 a month, no strings attached. What would that change for you? Would you finally start that passion project you've been putting off, go back to school? Or maybe just have a little more peace of mind knowing your basic needs are met? It's an interesting thought experiment, and one that might reveal a lot about what we truly value as individuals in this rapidly changing world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions.